Traders, how are you? Marcello, founder of the Day Trading Academy, co-founder of Speed Up Trader, where you can come and apply to use funded accounts instead of your own accounts in Forex and futures. Today, we're doing the recap from the beautiful city of Innsbruck, Deutschland. We're here in Germany, in the heart of coronavirus country. You guys can see it's absolutely beautiful here. It's actually a skiing town. And just give me a second while I set up the camera here to be able to record. It's a skiing town. The high season is over. One of the interesting things is I talked to one of my buddies who actually live here, and he was telling me how it's actually a Spanish, one of my Spanish friends, he's a trader. He was telling me how people in Italy and also Spain are going a little bit crazy from the coronavirus. They're emptying all of the supermarkets and everything. Whereas here in Austria and Germany, people, you know, it's a common cold. It's not really something that's going to be the end of the world, even though everybody's kind of overreacting about the situation. And I just wanted to tell you guys as well, I wouldn't necessarily overreact unless I had young children or I was a senior citizen, or possibly if I had a compromised immune system. For example, if you have cancer or you smoke a lot and you're an older person, due to the fact that it seems that the people that are most susceptible to the coronavirus are those people individually. Just to keep the numbers in mind, over 60,000 people die of the flu every year in the United States. And right now around the world, we only have just over 5,000 people that have died of the coronavirus. So just keep that in mind. You know, clean your hands, don't touch your face. If you're gonna go out, just remember, you know, kind of do one of these instead of touching your face with your hands, because that's generally where you're gonna get the coronavirus from. Avoid shaking hands and always continue to use disinfectants like hand sanitizer and things like that, and you'll be fine, don't worry. Because we're here in Germany and we're not really worried about it. So overall this week, not last week, but the previous week, we had a situation where we had $13.6 billion out of funds in US equities. That was 2 weeks ago from the recording of this video, or when you guys are gonna watch it. The sharpest pullback into the domestic market since September, and with the US bull run in the stock market over after 11 years. So officially, it is now over. Longest bull run market in history. On Monday, the chaos, let's say, started on Monday. We had a situation where, and this is just beautiful. I can't get over the view. If you guys look out here, this is just absolutely, I mean, this is as beautiful as it gets. So if you guys see me, if you guys see me looking to the left there, it's because I can't get over how beautiful it is here in Innsbruck, Germany. For those of you guys that are listening, you might want to go and to YouTube or Instagram if you're listening on the podcast, because it is quite a sight. So the chaos started on Monday. Remember that the futures markets opens at Sunday at 6 p.m. So on Sunday at 6 p.m. all the markets were down, and the market hit what's called the circuit breaker. After Black Monday, if I'm not mistaken, in 1987, there were limits that were placed in the stock market to be able to let cooler heads prevail. That's what the regulators say. So if the market, at the futures market, if it hits 5% overnight being 6 p.m. to 9:30 a.m., then the market is stopped. And on this scenario, it's +5 or -5. If I believe on Thursday, it hit the +5% mark. But on Sunday night, it hit the -5% mark. And what happens is they don't allow people to continue trading below that mark. So you can buy, you can trade up. If it goes up, it can trade above the 5%. But once it hit the 5% limit, it literally cuts off any orders below that limit. Once the normal market opens, the circuit breakers, or the limits to the market, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, are 7, 13, and 20%. So if the market hits 7%, negative or positive, they close it for 15 minutes. If it hits again 13%, again close it for 15 minutes. And then if it hits 20%, they close it for the day. And you know, because of euphoria of the market going up, or fear with the market going down, as I mentioned to you, what they say is, let the cooler heads prevail. So that's what happened on Monday, overnight, Sunday night, Monday morning. The S&P 500 fell about 6% on Monday. The Nasdaq fell 5.6%. This is all due, obviously, to the situation with the coronavirus. Mass fear on the streets in regards to that. Remember also, I'm going to read you a quote from Warren Buffett. I believe, and correct me here in the comments if I don't get it exactly right, and you have to excuse me because I'm doing it by memory, but it's be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful. Right now, the entire world is fearful. Gold and silver collapse as well. I'm going to talk about that as well. Remember, I talk about this as educational purposes. We're not trading advisors. We don't trade people's money. So remember, do your own research. Obviously, your accounts are your responsibility, but now's the time to start looking for opportunities. And remember what I said, if you guys haven't listened to or watched the video I did on the coronavirus, again, I do believe that the peak is now going to be in around April, May. I said March, April before. We'll most likely have a slow growth the first quarter, which is about 0.4 or 0.7%, something like that. The second quarter, which should be April, May, June, we'll have a contraction economically, and then in the third quarter, after all this is done and the economy kind of roars back, we'll have growth again in the third quarter. I'm a little bit worried now about Trump's re-election chances. Not that I want him to win or lose. Remember, I try to not be political when I record these videos and the podcast for you. But before, I thought he was a shoo-in to be able to get re-elected. Now, I think it's going to be a little bit more challenging for him because obviously people are scared and this whole situation with the coronavirus. The NYSE, the New York Stock Exchange, halted trading for 15 minutes after the markets plunged 7%. The Dow on Monday went down 7.79%. The S&P 500 went down 7.6%. The Nasdaq went down 7.29%, and the Russell 2000 9.37%. Oil overnight on Monday went down 30% due to the price war with Saudi Arabia, essentially with Russia, but against the entire world as well. I'll get into that in just a moment. On Tuesday, U.S. stocks rebounded after a 5% government intervention. Wednesday, Dow confirmed a bear market, 10% territory. So if the market's going up and we have a 10% drop, the 10% drop means it's a correction. 20% drop is a confirmation of a bear market or the market going down rather than up. So technically on Wednesday, the market hit 20%. The WHO, the World Health Organization, called the coronavirus a pandemic, which I've been calling for a few weeks now. The S&P 500 also was approaching a 20% loss as the domestic and global economy takes a hit. And on Thursday, the U.S. stocks took enormous losses as President Trump talked about. I believe it was on Thursday, the U.S. travel ban from Europe. Most indices were down 9%. And on Friday, we had enormous gains, the highest rebound in history, as $2 trillion recovered or returned to the stock markets. The U.S. markets now seem to be moving with three major data points: oil, the pandemic headlines being the coronavirus, and also the fiscal stimulus. For the week, the Dow was down 11.55%. For the year, it's down 18.76%. The S&P 500 went down 9.62% for the week. For the year, the S&P is down 16.09%, and the Nasdaq was down for the week 8.90%, also negative in double figures for the year as well. In overseas market news, Thursday, we had the same situation where the markets were very volatile, mostly negative. On Thursday, European stocks had their worst day in history. The German DAX went down over 12%, and the French, the SOC, also went down 12% as well. The Euro markets for the week, far lower. They're all close to between 20 to 30%. The biggest loser was Italy at 30.37%. Latin American markets, the coal cap was the biggest loser at almost 28% negative. Middle Eastern and Africa markets, again, mostly lower, with the biggest loser, South Africa, at 17.85%. And also the Asian and Australian markets were mixed. Thailand was down 20.90%, and the Philippines was down 16.84%. In Bitcoin and other news, didn't get to 20,000 or 50,000 as some of the analysts were predicting. One of the things I think is very funny is Bitcoin should be the refuge, right? The new gold, as they were saying. And even in this situation, we had with the coronavirus and the fear, it absolutely collapsed this week. Bitcoin went down 67.40%. On Thursday, it had a 24-hour loss of 26%, which was the largest loss in 7 years. And Sunday overnight, they weren't immune to the bloodbath that we had, losing nearly $21 billion in market cap. It's not going to be your year this year either, Bitcoin. Other than that, finance and banking news. International currency exchange rates saw sharp moves as traders are trying to establish where the new trading ranges are. The dollar obviously exploded due to the fear. We had the treasury yields as well collapse to record lows. The had a 0.25% drop in the U.S. 10-year treasuries. The U.S. Treasury yields went to record lows on Monday as well, as a lot of investors are looking for safe havens. And just so you guys don't know, gold and silver, I'm going to get to this in just a moment. I'll tell you the exact numbers of what the precious metals went down at. But due to the fact that the market is tanking, it's like a vicious cycle now, because the market goes down, people get scared, and they have margin calls, right? Because we had a huge drop this week, the worst by far since 1987, which was the bloodbath on Black Monday. So when the market drops like that, people get scared. They take their money out. They'll invest in what they think is secure, things like it should be precious metals, but more importantly, things like the bonds, because the government is never gonna go bankrupt, right? So other than that, we also had margin calls. If you guys don't know what margin calls is, when you're investing in the stock market, and a lot of markets, for example, like stocks and Forex, you can borrow money to invest. So when you borrow money to invest, that's called margin. When the market goes down so low that the value of your loan is getting hit, then they have something that's called a margin call, where they call you and say, hey, your margin is up, or you have to invest more money or close your positions out to be able to pay back that margin or that loan. So gold and silver absolutely collapsed this week, and one of the main reasons as well, aside from the other reasons, is because people had margin calls. They had to cover those loans that are in their stock accounts, and they sold their gold and silver to be able to go ahead and invest back into the stock market to be able to cover those, because nobody wants to lose money, and people obviously want to cover the losses or hope that the market's going to go back up. So that's why gold and silver had such a bloodbath week as well. I'll tell you guys in just a moment what the exact numbers were. The Bank of Japan is going to expand the monetary stimulus this week. They're pledging to buy more ETFs faster than the current pace. The Bank of Japan is close to losing $279 billion in its stock portfolio, raising concerns about its credibility. If I'm not mistaken, the Japanese economy in the quarter four of last year contracted 7.1%. So anything that they're doing in Japan to try to help the economy is definitely not working. The ECB is going to bring out new stimulus measures as well on Thursday, pushing monetary policy closer to its limits. The ECB is going to roll out much of what it has left, as it now has almost a depleted policy arsenal, as most other central banks around the world were lowering their interest rates, doing quantitative easing. Remember that the US was raising interest rates and cutting back on the QE. The QE, if you guys don't know, is the printing of the money, right? They just literally create the money and then they put it in the financial markets to be able to kind of help things go along. Commodities, oil had its worst day since 1991, Sunday night to Monday, 25% negative. Saudi Arabia starting a price war mostly with Russia and other markets. What happened there was that OPEC wanted to cut production, what's called OPEC Plus, which is all the countries that control the oil, about 40% of the market or so. Don't quote me on that, but it's right around there. And then they included Russia. United States, Russia, and Saudi Arabia, not in that order aside from US, are the top three producers of oil in the world. So they control, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's over 50%. So Saudi Arabia wanted to cut the price. Russia didn't, because Russia is saying that the only person that it's going to benefit is the United States, because after Trump released all the regulations and allowed the frackers to be able to really push the pedal to the metal when it comes to production, if OPEC, Saudi Arabia, which leads OPEC, and Russia cut production, the United States is a capitalist society, so they're not going to cut production. They're going to continue to increase it now that they're the largest producers in the world. So Russia didn't want to cut production because they're saying that it's only only going to benefit the United States, and Saudi Arabia said, forget it. So now they're going to increase production, they're going to slash their prices of oil to be able to try to get other people to fall in line. Other than that, Mexico and other nations are now trying to seek to mediate between the two nations to end the price war. Mexico's finance minister has cited prior experience to be able to go ahead and calm the feud. And essentially the reason why they're doing that is because a lot of these Latin American countries, primarily Colombia, also Ecuador, Mexico, they rely on the price of oil for their government budgets. So just to give you an example, since I'm based in Colombia, Colombia's 20% of their exports are in oil, but 50%, 50, of their income, the government budget is based on the oil price. That was at $50, $60. So imagine now when the price drops to 30, what the government is going to be, they're going to be in a big trouble economically. Their debt to GDP ratio is spiked to 80%. More than anything because the dollar is so strong and part of their debt is in dollars, but either way it's not a good situation for them, so they want to try to mediate. US crude went down 30.09%, it's down 45% in 2020. Brent, which is the international oil, went down 34.59%, down nearly 40% in 2020. Gold, when it hit a new high of $1692.70 last week, went down 9.41% to $1,530. And silver is backed away from the new recent high of 1890, with going back 17.84% to $14.79. Remember that the new high for oil is a recent high. It's not a brand new high for gold because obviously it's been there before. In political news, Russian President Putin is required by the Constitution to step down by 2024. There's going to be his second sequential and fourth presidential term. He's now in favor, surprise, of constitutional changes so he can remain in power until 2036. But he said after that, then he would be okay with the term limits once the country became politically mature. You do your thing, Putin. We all know you're not gonna release power. In economic news, I mentioned about the contraction in the Japanese economy. Australia will be in a technical recession in the first half of 2020, breaking 28 years of economic growth, and many economists expect as well that Germany is going to be in a recession in the first half of 2020. Remember that Germany is the largest economy in all of Europe. They're also an industrial powerhouse and the largest manufacturer exporter as well. Most analysts predict a similar outcome for the entire European monetary bloc, meaning that they're going to most likely be in a recession because they weren't doing that well. You know, United States was really the only country in the world that kind of had good numbers over this time. Other than that, Boeing is freezing new hiring and overtime except in certain critical areas to be able to preserve cash. In corporate news, they definitely can't catch a break after the fiasco with the 737 MAX. They're now going to draw down the rest of their $13.8 billion loan they took out last month. On Wednesday, their shares plunged 18%. It's the biggest one-day drop since 1974, and the shares are down 35.5% this month and 50% this year. Tesla stock is now down over 40% overall. And you guys can see on a chart, if you guys are traders or you want to learn about these things, you can see the behavior in the chart. Whenever the price of something goes parabolic, when it goes like that, it's kind of, let me get my hand right here. When it's going up like this, going up, and then it goes parabolic, when it goes like that, that's always the kind of the advisory, the thing that lets you know that it's going to crash. The same thing happened with Bitcoin before the crash in December when I called that to tell you guys to be careful about a week before the crash. The S&P 500 did that as well before it had one of these major contractions. It just always goes up like this when it's kind of going up, and then all of a sudden it'll go parabolic. The reason why it goes parabolic is because that's when all the cows are led to slaughter, as I say. So that's when kind of Main Street, the good old, normal guy on the street sees everything goes up. He wants to invest. He gets in at the top, obviously, instead of the bottom. And then that's when everything, all the normal people, let's say, jump into the stock market. It kind of gives it that parabolic behavior, and that's when it finally crashes. In trade news, the EU is drafting a post-Brexit trade deal covering areas such as security, foreign policy, European fisheries. The text was sent to the 27 EU nations, and next week it should be presented to the UK for approval or for negotiations. You guys know how the EU kind of does its business. They just kind of talk about it forever and they don't really come to a resolution. On Monday, there was over 142,000 confirmed cases of coronavirus. Almost 5,400 deaths related to that as well. South Korea is starting to show a slowdown, while Europe and North America appears to be worsening. Remember, it affects mostly children and the senior citizens, people who are older or who have compromised immune systems. So I wouldn't necessarily overreact, even though a lot of people are actually overreacting. In Italy, they have announced the entire country of 60 million people are going to be placed on quarantine. It's the second largest outbreak outside of China. The Italians are instructed to limit leaving their houses unless for urgent health care or work reasons. One of the things that I saw in Italy was that people are actually, they have, their dead wives or husbands are literally laying on the bed. The body's decaying, and there's nobody's available to be able to pick up the bodies. And this is something that actually may happen in the U.S. You know, the biggest homeless populations are in New York, in California, Democratic states. And one of the things that may happen is if emergency services or police or firefighters get the coronavirus, who's going to come around to police the streets or to pick up these dead bodies? And one of the things that I'm afraid of is that these huge homeless populations in some of these states might actually, the coronavirus might actually ravage through those communities. And when we think about compassion and thinking about the best things for these people, I don't necessarily think this is the best situation for them, as other states don't have these homeless situations. So unfortunately, I don't want to see this happen to them, but you know, unfortunately, these state governments allowed that to happen. Unfortunately, a lot of these people may pass away due to those kind of states allowing these things to happen. Other than that, there was a video on social media showing Turkish forces trying to remove the border fence with Greece to try to allow migrants to go into Greece. Turkey is essentially trying to blackmail Europe, as Europe is paying them to be able to house the migrants in their country rather than allowing them to come to Europe. Bulgaria actually put up a huge fence, so they're not trying to go to Bulgaria. They're trying to go to Greece, to Europe, because they think that they can have a better life there. And there's even a lot of citizens, Greek citizens, in some of these islands where a lot of these migrants are housed that are starting to rebel and go after these migrant camps. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with not only the policy of Europe, as they're starting to lean more to the right, but also they're starting to get an anti-immigrant stance, because I've talked to a few people while I was here, again, not to be political, but they're starting to cause a little bit of mischief here in Europe. A little bit is an understatement. Other than that, the U.S. launched airstrikes on weapons storage facilities in Iraq. It's a retaliation for a rocket attack that killed 2 U.S. service members and a British soldier. Strikes, which the Pentagon said targeted 5 facilities, a direct response to the threat posed by Iranian-backed Shia militia groups. And an unusual fact this week, the U.S. lawmakers rejected the idea of shutting down Congress for now as the highly contagious coronavirus spreads through the country. There's a conscious of need to show the calm in the face of an unfolding public health crisis, says Nancy Pelosi. She said, quote, "We are captains of the ship. We are the last to leave," unquote. Dr. Brian Monahan, which is the attending physician to Congress and the U.S. Supreme Court, is saying that up to 70 million to 150 million in the U.S. are expected to get infected by the COVID-19 or the coronavirus, and the Fed is raising a maximum offering of its daily operations in the repo market from $175 billion to 150 billion through mid-April. And last but not least, the Turkish Interior Minister said that the migrants who cross to Europe is going to go above 1 million, which is going to cause the fall of European governments and the destabilization of their economies as the situation, as I just told you, between Turkey and the European Union continues to escalate. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. We're going to continue here in coronavirus country in Europe. Remember not to panic. We're going to go ahead and enjoy this beautiful view, and we will see you guys next week.